All right, so welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for our first webinar of our series this week. It's National Pet Week. So this week we're celebrating all of the pets we have in our lives. And then we wanted to kick off our first webinar series with Jackie Coufal, who is a groomer at our Woofie's Leesburg location. There she is. If you have her on speaker view, you can see her nice and clearly. She's got a dog with her. Jackie, what is that, your dog or?
Yes, this is Breezy.
Okay, Breezy. So Jackie's got her dog Breezy with her. She's going to go through with us some tips and techniques for at-home brushing and taking care of your pet in between grooms. Just a couple of things to keep in mind. First of all, if you have any questions as we go along, you can either type them in the message box. So at the very bottom, you can see a little chat box. If you click on that, you're able to type a little message for a question. As we're going along in the webinar, I'm going to ask you that you mute yourselves. That way only Jackie's voice can be heard. When Jackie is finished with her presentation, we'll definitely open up for questions. So you can either type your questions in the chat box, or you can just ask your questions afterwards verbally. I think that's it. Amy Reed, our Woofie's co-founder and CEO, is there along with Jackie. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to them, and I'm going to ask that you guys just mute yourselves and enjoy the presentation. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. So happy to be here today, and hopefully I can shed some light on what might help you in between grooming sessions, or if you can't get to a groomer, or particularly to have one of us come to you right away. So this is Breezy, and the biggest thing with working with your dogs in between grooming is getting them comfortable with the brush. And a place to do it, it's always best to do a small dog up on a table, up on a countertop, washer and dryer, and then using a bath mat or a yoga mat. And this way the dogs learn that this is a time when they get to connect with you, but also you want to do some serious brushing. So the best thing to do is to teach them how that is okay. Many times when we're grooming, we always hear, well, my dog doesn't like the brush. So just like with housebreaking, leash walking, we have to teach them that it's okay to do that. And the best way is by baby steps. If the dogs don't that's okay, is to treat them. It's best to treat them throughout the whole process, and then it clicks that everything's going to be okay for them. And the idea is very, very short sessions, maybe 5 seconds, as long as they're cooperating. And what I mean by that is having some peanut butter or cream cheese handy. So what I'm going to do is show you how to get your dog used to having their beards held, because the dogs that have beards and ears with long hair tend to get very, very matted in between groomings, and they also don't care for it too much because it might hurt a little bit. So in a second, I'll tell you why a certain brush is the best one to use. But when you're holding your dog's beard and they don't struggle, you treat right away with a little lick of peanut butter. No words, just treat. Now, if I hold her beard and she fights with me like this, I just stop and just let her figure out that she's not going to get a reward. And then I try again, and she doesn't struggle, so I give her a little lick of peanut butter. And then after she's used to me holding her beard, I introduce the brush, and then I brush, and I brush, and as long as she's not struggling, I don't reward her until we're all finished with that particular brushing. So that's the very first thing to do, is to get the dog used to being brushed. And the same thing goes with holding their legs. Many dogs are uncomfortable with their legs being held or their toenails being looked at. So when they're doing it and they're not struggling, then I give a quick reward, and then I put the foot down, and I don't use a brush yet. I just wait till she's offering or giving me her foot and not struggling. The second she struggles, I just drop it, and we just don't do anything for a second. And then I'll introduce the brush the same way. And then when they're not struggling, I'll reward with some peanut butter or cream cheese, but only just a little bit. A little bit goes a long way. And when they start to struggle too much, you just put them down and wait for a little while and then go back to it. Never do more than 5 seconds or so. It will really help in between groomings to be able to brush their ears out, their beards, and their legs to prevent them from getting matted in between grooming, which is the biggest thing. And also to get those mats out before grooming and before a bath are really, really important. And the best way to do that is with the perfect brush. We're going to have a link to this brush, and the reason that it's so perfect for every single breed and dog is because it actually works to demat and doesn't harm the dog. So it's because of the curve of the brush, the type of bristles, which are very soft, and the way that it gives. Breezy's trying to get more peanut butter for not doing anything. And the same thing goes for just using one brush. No breed needs more than one brush. I'll show you a little bit with my Aussie how it even works for him really well, and it doesn't hurt. It stimulates the skin. It helps get all the tangles out, as well as if the dog's got dry skin, it'll help stimulate it so that it's not so dry. And that's brushing. Any questions about brushing at this point? No? Okay. So the next thing I'm sure you're wondering is nails, which we are having our curbside nail service happening at all of our locations. And sometimes it's really important, though, for you to take care of nails at home in between getting them professionally clipped. And it's very easy to teach your dog that it's okay by the same simple rules I just discussed with the brushing, just by holding and then treating when they don't fuss. And the best way to work with nails at home is with a coarse piece of sandpaper or an emery board, because you can't go too short with those tools. And what you'll do with an emery board or a piece of sandpaper is simply take the nail and just go like this. And it helps take the sharp edge off the nail and get it a little bit shorter, but it isn't going to do much without being cut, which we can do at our curbside services, as well as our baths, our quick baths in between groomings, which are helpful. But it's real important that there are no mats at that time, because water and soap make the mats even worse if they can't be brushed out beforehand. So that's the brushing and nails. Also, it's very important in between grooming to constantly keep an eye on your dog's eyes. As the little sleepies accumulate in the corners of the eyes, many, many times it's harmful when we have to use clippers or our fingers in the bath to really loosen up that really tight crust. So if you can use your finger every day to just take away that stuff, it'll make it a whole lot easier. It's a little bit abrasive if you're using cotton ball or a baby wipe. It's best just to use your finger. You can really clean that area well, even with some little bit of water. If you do find that you need to use some soap at home to wash a beard because it's stinky or they rolled in something and you can't get to us right away, the best thing to do is very, very, very diluted shampoo, not human shampoo and not human conditioner, but very, very diluted, 50 to 50, a really good shampoo. But that would just be a good thing to know for spot washing. The other thing you can do to take away some of the grease if the dog is greasy before shampooing or in between shampooing is to use a little bit of baby powder or cornstarch and just sprinkle it and brush it in. It'll help absorb any smell as well as dirt. But brushing is your best thing to do in between groomings. And also checking their ears. Although we work really, really hard not to get water in the ears, we get water in our ears and so do the dogs. So it's best just to make sure that nothing's going on in there, and smell is a really huge sign of something going on. As groomers, we always clean their ears, but you want to take care of that in between as well, just by making sure that they're doing okay. Let me show you with Merlin on the table. A big dog works well with this brush as well. Come here, Merlin. Here, Merlin. He says, I'm all happy here. Come here, bud. Over here. Come here. Come here. Come here, buddy. No, you don't jump on the table. Come here, bud. So this is Merlin. He's a very big boy. And the brush that we're going to use is the same thing, very good for these guys too. Any of your big dogs with a double coat or your single coated dogs, getting the brush through their coats, you want to see their bodies move a little bit so that you're getting the teeth to the skin. The teeth help stimulate the skin and also help to get all the dead hair out. Even though he gets brushed, I guess regularly, he still has hair coming out because it's that time of the year. When we do the curbside baths, we use a high power Air Force blower, which also gets the undercoat out. But if you can brush in between, it'll make a huge big difference for the condition of the coat. When you're using this brush on dogs with this hair on the legs, and there's a mat, the same thing with the smaller dogs, you always want to put your hand behind the fur where the brush is, so that you're brushing up against your hand and not necessarily working the mat out on the dog's skin. So have the mat between the brush and your hand and brush against your hand, which will help get the mat out. The same thing goes for the tail and the back end. Merlin has a lot of hair back here, so I'm using my hand to brush up against, to brush the matting up against his. I'm using my hand to brush out instead of his body. So it's breaking up the mats very easily without causing any harm, as well as on his tail. It's really a nice brush to be able to get any kind of knotting out of a long tail, and Merlin's finished. He says, I'm done with this exercise. So that's Merlin. So I got a lot of hair out, even though we didn't do a whole lot, and he was done with the exercise. Probably because I didn't give him any peanut butter in between, so he says, I'm done. Any questions on the brushing, the brush, using sandpaper on nails?
So Jackie, we do have a question from someone. What do we do if the dog has matted hair behind the ears?
Oh, that's a really good question. Don't use scissors. You don't want to cut it out, and chances are that is probably going to have to wait for a groomer to use clippers. However, I have a ball of hair here like a mat. You can try to pull apart the mat like this, and many times they're just going to be way too hard to do. But if you have the right brush and you take the corner of the brush, pull a little bit apart and just work it out on your fingers. Work out the mat gradually. The other thing you can use is a wide tooth comb. So if you break apart the mat a little bit and then get the comb in there, if the dog's going to sit still, it's perfect. It'll take you a little while. But please don't use scissors, because many times it's hard to tell where the skin is and where the mat is, and ears can get cut that way. So you're just going to try to pull the mat apart and use the comb or the corner of the brush and just work it out. Many times it has to be clipped out with clippers because it does get very tight. Did that help?
That definitely answered that question. We have a few more.
Okay.
I have a question. What should you do for mats within the paw pads?
Okay, so the paw pad mats have to be shaved out. And that's another really good question, and another reason why it's really important to keep an eye on your dog's grooming schedule, because that becomes very painful for the dog when they have too much matting in their pads. And we use clippers to get that matting out. So if it is really bad, you definitely cannot brush it or use scissors. You need to use clippers for that. So we would have to do that during our grooming session. But if it is getting bad, they will start to chew their foot with the matting on their pads.
Okay, and then what are the most common areas that get matted besides behind the ears? What do you see the most as a groomer?
Behind the ears, the paw pads, and their rumps get very matted. At times, if they have a lot of hair back there, there can get matting. It gets wet. Matting on the legs of all the fluffy little dogs that have hair on their legs get very matted when they get wet from rain or just going outside. So legs get very matted too. Mostly it's the length of the coat that causes the matting. So if a coat is kept at a reasonable length, like a short puppy cut, it won't mat. So when a dog is on a regular grooming schedule, 4, 6, 8 weeks, usually with a dog that's kept up they won't be matting, even behind the ears, unless they're super, super long.
Okay,
Next.
Jackie, I also have another question about, do you have any tips for at-home ear cleaning or teeth brushing in between grooms?
Sure. The very best thing you can do in between teeth brushing is a really good thing to get in the habit of doing every day, just like we are. You prevent gingivitis and all those crazy things that happen in dogs' mouths. So a good, any dog toothpaste, and the rubber thimbles are great, or a real soft baby toothbrush is perfect. It's more about getting the toothpaste in the mouth that make a difference. And then ears are a really good thing to keep an eye on, and using a cotton ball with a teeny tiny bit of rubbing alcohol at home is really all you need to do to clean out that ear. You don't want to put it in the ear canal, but just around the ear, and make sure you're just using a cotton ball and not a Q-tip unless you're really familiar with the dog's ear. Keeping an eye on it, making sure it smells right. A big indication of a dog not being well is the smell of their ears and the smell of their breath. When those things don't smell right, something's going on. So ear cleaning is real important. There are products out there. Anything that's a cleaning product for a dog that's very gentle is very easy to use. It's not a big deal. You can't hurt them. Anything that you're using or can get at the pet store or Amazon for pets or Chewy.com, anything that's natural will be a really good thing to put in the ear, but you just use a little bit on a cotton ball. Does that help?
Yes, thank you so much. Another question, what is a reasonable regular grooming schedule for a dog?
Well, for a dog, not every dog has to be groomed. Dogs shouldn't be bathed more than once a month. So a 4, 6, or 8 week schedule is really ideal, but it's all personal preference. Depends on the dog's coat, what the owner enjoys seeing in the dog, whether it's long or short. A big dog like Merlin really never needs a bath. It's brushing is the key thing. And of course, his nails and his ears need to be taken care of. But they don't need baths. Our dogs don't have the same skin that we do. Their skin does not replenish the natural oils. So therefore, we cause problems and strip their skin by bathing too much. So no more grooming than every 4 weeks, maybe 4, 6, or 8 weeks. It's a personal preference, but we find that when they're on a schedule, whatever that schedule is, we can keep them in really good shape. And they don't get mats, and we can also, groomers have their eyes and hands in places that owners don't even know exist on the dog. So we find lumps and bumps and things that maybe you just missed because you don't have your face in those certain places to keep them all groomed and nice. Next question.
Yes, we have a question. What would be a good brush for a husky that sheds constantly, about 3 inches down the back and the brush is full?
Well, the idea with a dog like a husky is to brush, 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 brush. And this brush really is the very best brush to use. There are lots of tools out there that we as groomers use on dogs like huskies. There's like a Furminator is a good one to use. Although it is a blade, so you have to be very careful about how you're using it, but it does work for a husky. There's all kinds of other things that you can use, but the very best place to start is to find the right brush and just keep on brushing. The curbside baths would be really good for a husky because we use that high power blower and it blows the hair out. That's probably the best defense or defense for a husky's coat is the high power blower that we have in our vans. And then a really good brush. So it's just a constant brushing with a husky, particularly this time of the year because they're blowing their coats.
And since we're talking about the brush, Jackie, I'm just going to share my screen for a second.
Okay.
I want to show, let's see, I'm going to have to come back to that. I wanted to share my screen to show the brush that you're recommending. We'll come back to that so you guys can see exactly. It's on Amazon, pretty inexpensive, about $18.99. But let me move on to the next question before we do that. Someone's asking, I have a white Cavachon. Can I bathe her more than once a month using oatmeal dog shampoo and conditioner? Or is that not good for her skin?
No, that's not good. It doesn't really matter what kind of shampoo or conditioner you're using. The fact that you're doing it too often is going to strip the natural oils from her skin. If you absolutely have to bathe her, be sure to dilute that shampoo way down and try just spot washing. I know the white dogs are getting dirty really fast, but try not to get the shampoo on her body more than once a month. Use it on her legs, her muzzle, places that get dirty, but down the road, you will end up most likely by bathing that often with skin issues way down the road. And that's not a fun thing to have come when the dog's young and healthy and can handle a bath, but it's really best not to. If you have to, use it very, very diluted.
Okay, great. And I've got my screen share
Okay.
on. I'm going to be sharing that brush that you were talking about. Can everybody see that? You can just nod your head if you see it. Do you want to talk just a little bit about the difference between the long pins and the regular pins? Jackie, which one you suggest?
The regular pins are a little bit more on the gentle side for every single type of dog. The longer pins would probably be a really good dog brush for the husky. The longer the pins, the thicker the coat would be. So that would probably be a really good choice with a dog like a husky, a Keeshhound, a full coated Aussie, anything that has a double coat very thick. Although I use the same brush on my Aussies. But the longer pin is for your double coated thicker dogs. The other pin one, the softer pin, not softer one, the regular pins, they're just very, very gentle, but do an amazing job. I use that brush on every single dog I groom. I don't ever switch between brushes. So it's a really excellent brush to use for everybody. And perfect for mats, dematting. And you can use it on yourself, it won't hurt. But you do have to apply some pressure when you're brushing your dog. Keep that in mind. You want to make sure that your brush is going and hitting the skin. That's the key to brushing the dog. And when the ears are really matted, a flap on a dog's ear is very, very thin. And many times it can be confusing when the ear flap gets really big and some folks don't realize that it's actually matting. So the brush has to hit the ear flap, has to hit your hand, and you'll know you're going through it with that brush. And it's also no brush burn with that brush. You just have to keep moving around the dog and you'll see a great big difference in how well their coats take to that brush.
Thank you, Jackie. I also have another question here about cats. Do you have experience with cats? And can you, I know grooming cats and grooming dogs, I'm sure, is a very different thing.
Yes, I have groomed some cats. I can try to answer the question.
Okay, so do you have, what is a recommendation that you would have for if you wanted to just brush your cat's coat out? Are there any things to keep in mind? Is the matting situation the same treatment that you would give to a dog, you would give to a cat?
Well, a cat, if it's an Angora cat where it's such a fine fur, it mats like crazy. So those cats, when they're not kept up on a regular basis, get very matted and do have to be shaved. There is a groomer in Maryland that will actually brush those cats out, but it's very, very traumatic for them. So this brush would be fine for a cat like that, and getting a cat used to being brushed might be a little tricky. That I have never done. I've only shaved them instead of brushing them.
Just another question about cats. Do you suggest baths for cats?
Oh, no. No, I wouldn't unless you absolutely have to. That can be pretty crazy. They do have specific things like a cat bag they use. Put a cat inside of a bag with holes so the claws can't really get through, which is the big thing. Cats kind of freak out with baths, but cats are usually not bathed unless it's something where they're sick or they've had trauma at one end or the other and they need a bath, but that can be very tricky.
Okay, Jackie, what is the best tool to cut the hair between the pads?
The only thing that's safe is to use a pair of clippers. You can buy I can share another link with a pair of very inexpensive clippers that you can use at home. That would be the only way that would be safe enough to get the mat out of the pad, is to use a clipper.
Okay, great. I want to open it up and see if anybody else wants to unmute themselves and ask any additional questions.
Okay.
To Jackie. Okay. All right. Well, if you all don't have any other questions, I'm going to thank Jackie so much for her time today,
Thank you.
going through the tips and techniques at home grooming with your dog. And I will go ahead and send this recording out to all of you just so that you can have it. This will also be sent out to our clients so that whoever couldn't make it can watch it. I do want to take a second to talk about curbside baths and nail trims, which we've just added to the schedule. If you have a need for a nail trim or a bath anytime in the near future, you don't have to wait for the mobile pet spa to come around to your house. You can actually do a drive-in curbside drop-off with your dog. All you have to do is schedule with us at petservices@woofies.com, and we can get you on the schedule. So we're conducting those curbside nail trims and baths anytime, Monday through Friday, and even on the weekends. So again, petservices@woofies.com if you're interested in scheduling an appointment. And that's it. Thank you, Jackie. We really appreciate your tutorial there, and your dogs also did a great job.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank
Jackie.
you.
Sure, thank you.
Michelle.
Jackie.